showing those people who did not have security clearances those very same documents, including a classified Pentagon plan about a potential attack on Iran.
All sorts of stuff. It's pages long. Look. Wait a minute. Let's see here.
Yeah.
I just found, isn't that amazing? This totally wins my case, you know. Except it is like highly confidential, secret. This is secret information. But look at this. You attack. This was done by the military, given to me. I think we can probably, right?
I don't know. We'll have to see. Yeah, we'll have to try to
Declassify.
figure out yeah.
See, as president, I could have declassified it. Now I can't, you know, but this is classified.
Now we have a problem.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
It's so cool. And you probably almost didn't believe me, but now you believe me.
No, I believe
It's
you.
incredible, right?
No,
Hey, bring some Cokes in, please.
Hey, guys, can we get some Cokes in here, please? As we look through these classified documents, you hear the shuffling of the papers. It's just unbelievable, right? But a few months after the release of that audio, federal prosecutors hardened their analysis. In a legal filing, Jack Smith's office said they were confident that they knew exactly why Trump allegedly retained the documents. Specifically, they said what Trump knew and what Trump intended in retaining them, the government will prove at trial. Except we are still waiting for that trial. Trial date was originally set for this past May. Despite both sides, Jack Smith and Trump, being willing to go to trial in July or in August, the federal judge overseeing the case, a Trump nominee named Eileen Cannon, has made that impossible. Last month, Judge Cannon officially postponed the trial indefinitely. Cannon appears to be doing everything within her power to slam on the brakes and bring this case to a virtual standstill, letting motions pile up and granting time-consuming hearings on trivial matters. So it's no wonder that despite Trump's history of attacking every judge who presides over his multiple criminal cases, he has never once gone after Judge Cannon. In fact, he has done quite the opposite.
I know it's a very highly respected judge, a very smart judge, and a very strong judge.
But you appointed her.
I did, and I'm very proud to have appointed her, but she's very smart and very strong and loves our country. I mean, loves our country. We need judges that love our country, so they do the right thing.
The message was loud and clear. The American public will likely not find out why the Republican frontrunner refused to return state secrets he had stored away in his mansion and what exactly he intended to do with them before they head to the polls this November. If Trump wins, he could shut down the case entirely, and we may never find out. But what that does concern does not appear to be a priority for Judge Cannon. Instead, she seems intent on wasting time by scheduling bizarre hearings like the one that took place today in the courthouse in Fort Pierce, Florida, where Trump's defense team argued a point they first raised 4 months ago, that somehow Jack Smith was unconstitutionally appointed as special counsel. A desperate legal argument that has been routinely dismissed by other judges in similar circumstances. But Judge Cannon thinks that argument, well, it is worth a full day in court. At today's hearing, she grilled government prosecutors about how closely Attorney General Merrick Garland oversees their work. The prosecutor replied he was not authorized to discuss the level of communication before adding, "I don't want to make it seem like I'm hiding something." Also, when Trump lawyer Emil Bovee claimed that the existence of a special counsel amounted to a shadow government, Cannon replied, "That sounds very ominous. But what does that mean?" Trump's lawyer, of course, did not answer Cannon's question. He just repeated his argument that Jack Smith was somehow inappropriately appointed. But his failure to answer does not matter in the end. Judge Cannon's decision to entertain such novel arguments and to eat up more time on the clock was in itself another in a series of wins for Trump and his defense. The question now, will that winning streak continue? Joining me now, Matthew Seligman, a lawyer and legal scholar who presented oral arguments in front of Judge Cannon today. Thank you so much for being with us on what I know was a busy day for you. You argued in front of Judge Cannon today that counter to Trump's lawyer's argument, Jack Smith's appointment was indeed constitutional. The main points you were trying to get across.
Well, first, thanks for having me. So the main points to get across here are that there are decades of precedent that establish that the special counsel is constitutional and that Jack Smith was lawfully appointed. Every court to have ever addressed this issue in similar circumstances, in identical circumstances, has held that. So for Judge Cannon to entertain this issue, well, if she rules ultimately that Jack Smith was unconstitutionally appointed, that would be an extraordinary breach with precedent, and I'm confident that ultimately both the 11th Circuit and the Supreme Court would swiftly reverse her.
Matthew, I want you to help me understand something, which is a lot of people were surprised that Cannon even allowed outside parties to the case, such as yourself, to argue in court today. Were you surprised?
Yes, I was. So we never intended to try to participate in this. It's extraordinarily uncommon for amici, like the clients that I represent, to participate in an oral argument, even at the Supreme Court. So when we filed a motion to participate, we said we only wanted to do so because she had asked the other side to participate. And when we filed that motion, we noted that even at the Supreme Court, only 0.2% of cases have outside counsel, amici, that don't represent the government of the United States participate. So it's extraordinarily uncommon. And I think that's an indication that Judge Cannon was seriously entertaining this issue that had been so quickly rejected by every other court. Well,
you layer on to the sort of unusual nature of having outside counsel the fact that there were also a lot of legal experts who thought that today's hearing just shouldn't have occurred at all, that matters like this are often dismissed without the need for a hearing. What say you?
Well, the fact that she had a hearing at all, is neither here nor there for me. The most important takeaway from today, I think, that might not come through from reading the headlines is that Judge Cannon seemed to reject President Trump's argument. Yep. Seemed very skeptical of his position. Now, there are some caveats to that, which we can go into, but ultimately, I think the most important takeaway from her questions today is that she has everything that she needs. She has all the materials in hand to swiftly reject President Trump's argument that Jack Smith was unconstitutionally appointed. And so this can move forward quickly. And she has all the materials she needs in order to do so.
I agree that the skepticism was pretty clear in the reporting. Tell me, though, about those caveats you referenced.
The most significant caveat, I think, was a line of questioning that you referenced in the intro that happened at the very, very end. So she probed the special counsel's attorney about the actual level of involvement that Attorney General Merrick Garland has in overseeing the case. Now, that's legally irrelevant. The only thing that matters is whether Merrick Garland has legal authority to control the case and to dismiss special counsel Smith if he wants to. And that's undoubtedly true. But Merrick Garland, as other attorney generals have before, has made a policy decision not to interfere in the day-to-day conduct of the investigation and prosecution, just as he has with respect to the prosecution of Hunter Biden. Now, it's not relevant whether Merrick Garland has actually interfered with or had contact with, et cetera, the day-to-day operations of the special counsel's office. But Judge Cannon asked repeatedly about that. And that indicates to me that she might want to probe that further. And that worries me for two reasons. First, it is legally irrelevant, and so it's not a road that should be gone down at all. And second, it could eat up a lot of time and cause a lot more delay. So I'm hopeful that Judge Cannon ultimately recognizes that under the law, these sorts of factual probings into the internal workings of the Department of Justice are both inappropriate, unwarranted, and irrelevant.
Matthew Seligman, on what has indeed been a very busy day for you, lawyer and legal scholar, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks
I
for
want to bring
me.
into the conversation Glenn Kirshner, a former federal prosecutor and MSNBC legal analyst. Glenn, as we came on air, we have a new filing from Jack Smith. In it, Jack Smith is reiterating his support for a gag order in this case after Trump repeatedly said that agents were trying to kill him during the Mar-a-Lago search. Cannon has already scheduled a hearing for this on Monday. Just what do you make of it all?
Well, what I make of it, Alicia, is Jack Smith is pulling no punches. I briefly went through this new court filing, and here is one of the representations a special counsel makes. He says Trump essentially argues that, quote, the First Amendment will be eroded unless he, Donald Trump, is permitted to lie about FBI agents intending to murder him and his family. The law requires no such thing. I mean, these are blunt assertions by Jack Smith. And, you know, when we reflect back on how we got here, you know, Donald Trump's lawyers were given a heads up about when the FBI would be executing the search warrant at Mar-a-Lago, and they specifically timed it when both Donald Trump and his family would be out of the state of Florida. And what did Donald Trump do with that information? He lied and said the FBI was coming down there to assassinate him. They were locked and loaded and ready to harm his family. Those kind of lies are designed to inspire people to perhaps violence against FBI agents. And that's why Jack Smith is sort of going scorched earth, trying to get his conditions of release modified to put a stop to this kind of reckless, violence-inducing rhetoric.
Okay, so that is the hearing on Monday. Let's talk about the hearing from today, because I'm trying to square the fact that there did seem to be skepticism from Judge Cannon on the arguments from Team Trump. And at the same time, she seemed really interested in grilling prosecutors about just how closely Attorney General Merrick Garland monitors Jack Smith's investigation. I wonder what you made of both pieces. What does it suggest to you?
Boy, Alicia, what I made of that is it sounded like a political talking point, not a matter of legal significance. As Mr. Seligman just said, it is legally irrelevant. Either the special counsel procedures are lawful and appropriate, and they are, as every court has ruled in recent years, or they're not. And, you know, the first thing I thought of when I saw that she was, I believe, stepping a toe over the separation of powers line by beginning to ask legally irrelevant questions that you can see how they might help Donald Trump paint the picture that somehow Merrick Garland and Joe Biden are more involved in his prosecution than they ought to be. The first thing I thought of is this feels a lot like when Judge Cannon got involved in this special master nonsense, which the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals said, Judge Cannon, you abused your judicial discretion by doing what you did because you had no right to interfere in an ongoing DOJ investigation. But she did, and she did it to the extreme advantage of Donald Trump. That has echoes of what we heard in that Florida courtroom where she was probing how much interaction Jack Smith and Merrick Garland might be having.
Well, and Glenn, you take it all sort of in the shadow of the New York Times reporting from yesterday about how two separate judges really urged her to hand this case off to someone else. You've been making this argument about Cannon for a while. It's one of those things where it's like there's no glory in being right here, right, Glenn?
No, I wish we were all wrong. I wish he was a fair, independent, and impartial judge so we could all have confidence in the outcome of this trial. But I would call it blockbuster reporting when the New York Times said two federal court judges who are her colleagues in that federal jurisdiction down in Florida, including the chief judge, Judge Altanaga, who advised her, do not preside over Donald Trump's case. And in case anybody is interested, Judge Altanaga was appointed by President George W. Bush. So I know how Donald Trump loves to label everybody an angry Democrat or a rhino, but I think, unfortunately, these days it becomes of interest, you know, which president appointed which judge that is now seemingly at odds with Donald Trump.
Glenn, before I let you go, let's just end where we always end, which is this question of removal, right? Because, one, you just have this push and pull tension for Jack Smith of knowing that that would inevitably delay this case. Also, the bar he has to clear fairly high.
Yeah, I mean, I think Judge Cannon's disqualification cup runneth over. I think in aggregate, everything she has done shows that her impartiality might reasonably be questioned, which is the federal standard requiring a judge to disqualify themselves from a case. So I believe at some point, if she continues to refuse to set a trial date, even if, as you mentioned in your lead-in, the defense, Donald Trump's lawyer said, we can do August 12th. She said, no, I'm setting no trial date. At what point is enough enough?
Glenn Kirshner, as always, thank you so much for being with us. We have a lot more to come tonight. Although the Supreme Court recently turned back one attack on reproductive freedom, anti-abortion advocates, well, they have another potent weapon ready to fire. An explanation and a warning is coming up. Plus, new reporting about Donald Trump's latest campaign moves. That is next.
Is that grease on your pants, or are you just happy to see me?
This has changed our relationship completely.
You need to figure it out or you're both gone.
Don't drop the anchor.
This is Asta.
I love you so much. We do.
Throughout humanity's existence, there have been ideas, strides, and accomplishments. Simple changes that redefine everything. For example, this will be the last moment you ever think of soda as being a dirty word. Soda! And that's because this soda, Poppy, has none of the bad stuff. Instead, it has all of the flavor. The future of soda is now, and it's called Poppy.
Pause for the facts. Classic first-timers. They don't know that nearly half of all used cars have been in an accident. But Carfax shows how accidents impact price, so they don't have to overpay. Unpause.
Oh, why not no accidents?
Shop the all-new Carfax.com.
Why choose a Sleep Number smart bed?
I need help with her snoring.
Sleep Number does that.
Thank you.
Shop our lowest prices of the season with free home delivery when you add an adjustable base. Sleep Number smart bed starting at $9.99. Learn more at sleepnumber.com.
Hi, I'm Denise. I've lost over 22 pounds with Golo in 6 months, and I've kept it off for over a year. I was skeptical about Golo in the beginning because I've tried so many different types of diet products before. I've tried detox, I've tried teas, I've tried all different types of pills. So I was skeptical about anything working because it never did. But look what Golo has done. Look what it has done. I'm in a size 4 pair of pants. Go Golo.
1 second she can't walk. Then she can. 1 second you're single. And then you don't want to be. 1 second it's a pipe dream. And the next, it's a dream come true. 1 second you feel safe. And then,
The police are on their way.
well, you still do.
I can't imagine doing a race like this with somebody else.
$500,000. That would change everything.
We're cold, we're wet, and we have no food.
I'm gonna keep going until I can.
We can think faster, we can move faster.
I can't jump there. Are you okay?
What we care about is the end crate and getting $500,000.
Race to survive New Zealand.
Okay, guys. Ceremony starts in 5.
1 sec. Just got a hymns real quick. Hymns? Yeah, hymns. Hymn 2.
Hymns for ED. Always works for me.
I'm hymnsing right now. So simple, so convenient. Hymns. Weight loss by hymns, boys. You got to get on it, son.
For care that's doctor trusted, convenient, and personalized, get started today at hims.com.
Not you again. I can't talk to a doctor about this. It's embarrassing. ZocDoc? You're right. I bet they deal with this all the time. What about Dr. Anderson? Okay. Dr. Finley really puts you at ease. And she takes my insurance too. Let's do it.
You've got more options than you know. Book now.
I'm gonna miss you too.
There is news today on the presidential campaign trail. NBC News now reporting that Donald Trump has narrowed his vice presidential shortlist to just 2 or possibly 3 candidates. Previous reporting indicated Trump was focused on 4 potential running mates: North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, Florida Senator Marco Rubio, and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. Despite a weeks-long groveling performance as a dutiful Trump surrogate, NBC's new reporting suggests that Tim Scott is no longer a top contender. NBC News also reports that while Senator Marco Rubio remains in contention, doubts about his enthusiasm for the job and concerns about navigating a constitutional hang-up that would require Trump or Rubio to establish residency in another state have persisted in ways that could jeopardize his chances. Joining us now, Jonathan Allen, senior national politics reporter for NBC News and one of the reporters bylined on this story. So Jonathan, before we get into all the back and forth here and the great reporting that you've done here, I want to start by reminding us that none of this is normal, and that even though we're talking about a Veep stakes, this is not a normal Veep stakes because this is not a normal candidate. And whoever he chooses is not being chosen to check his authoritarian tendencies. They are, in fact, being chosen because they are signing up for letting him run free.
Well, certainly, Alicia, this is an unusual process. Typically, what you'll see from presidential candidates is a very close to the vest process where they don't really talk about these other possibilities. Here we see Donald Trump appearing everywhere with the folks. He'll go out and ask his crowds, as he did earlier this week, whether they think one of the candidates, in this case J.D. Vance, ought to be on his ticket. So certainly an unusual process. I think we all know from Donald Trump's experience and from what he said about his last vice president, Mike Pence, that he was disappointed that Pence did not support his effort to overturn the election. And you can gather from that, I think you can glean from that Donald Trump will be looking at that level of loyalty as a qualification.
Well, to that point, I think that's what I actually find most interesting about sort of the subtext of your reporting here, which is that Trump, as we've watched, he's dangled the vice presidency, at least the ability to run with him in front of people like Tim Scott. He's gotten them to perform for him on the campaign trail. And yet that is no guarantee, right? And so people sort of keep showing up, keep auditioning, and the loyalty to him seems to be the one consistent variable.
Yeah, it's like he's dragging a $100 bill across the floor on a string and seeing how fast the candidates can crawl and how much they will fight with each other in order to try to get to that $100 bill. And by the way, he may just pull it up with a string at the end. Every time I talk to folks close to Trump in his campaign, they all acknowledge that they're not entirely sure that the person he's going to select will be one of these people who have been playing the apprentice game.
Right, because as you remind us, it also is for him about the reality TV show of it all, and the fact that if we're talking about this, then we're not talking about his myriad legal woes. We're not talking about all of his vulnerabilities as a candidate. Part of your writing, you write, a key point of tension and indecision in the Trump campaign is balancing the desire for a running mate who is non-threatening against the desire for someone who can also be considered the future of Trump's movement. Talk to me about that tension, what it means to be non-threatening to Donald Trump.
Yeah, Alicia, it's an interesting sort of internal debate in Trump world about exactly what those best qualifications are, particularly when it comes to an heir apparent, and whether it's good for Trump to sort of make someone the next person to take the torch of the MAGA movement, or if he would prefer to not be in that position yet of handing off the torch. And it gets to your earlier question, which is, sort of what's the best way to play this, I guess, for some of these candidates, or the way that they're being looked at by Trump in terms of not outshining him. If you're Donald Trump and you like the limelight, the thing you hate the most is anything that takes that away from you. And if you have a vice president that is looked at as the next presidential nominee of the Republican Party, it won't be but a year or two before that person starts getting a whole lot more attention. So we'll have to see, who Trump goes with and how they sort of fit into that question of the MAGA movement and succeeding him. But from what I've heard from a lot of the sources I've spoken to, they believe he really doesn't want somebody that will compete with him for attention during his term.
Here's the thing you know well, Jonathan Allen, which is we talk about the messaging, we talk about the debates, we talk about the optics, and at the end of the day, so much of this just comes down to the ground campaign, but that is virtually impossible to capture in this context. New reporting that Biden has just hired his 1,000th battleground staffer. The Trump campaign reportedly outsourcing their GOTV efforts to groups like Turning Points USA. What do you make of the difference in that strategy?
I mean, I think it's born of necessity for Trump. He got on the ground later. There was an important court case that sort of gave them the opportunity to coordinate more with outside groups, and they're going to need it because Trump raised money slower, which meant that he was unable to open as many offices and put as many field staff out there as he wanted to initially. And so there's going to be some support network for him on the outside. Biden and the Democrats, the DNC, any other groups that want to help them, they're also going to be out in the field. field. I think one really important thing to remember here, though, Alicia, is that the ground game only matters in a handful of states, because only a handful of states are going to determine the Electoral College math, and it only ends up mattering in a very, very close race. And some of these battlegrounds will probably end up being 3 points or 4 points, and probably the ground game didn't end up making the difference there. But in those states like Wisconsin last time, where you're talking about, or Arizona or Georgia, where you're talking about a difference of like 10 or 20,000 votes in the state, the ground game could be everything.
Indeed. Jonathan Allen, thank you so much for bringing us your reporting and being with us tonight.
Thanks,
Still
Lisa.
ahead, Democrats in Congress are trying to repeal a 151-year-old law that regulates the mail. Why? Because anti-abortion conservatives have very specific, very draconian plans for how a second Trump administration should use that law to control your body. I'm going to talk to Michelle Goldberg of the New York Times about it next.
Grandpa and I used to work on this together. I've never seen a man love something so much. And when I'm gone, I want you to have it.
Seriously? Doesn't count. What you need is a will. Luckily, Trust and Will makes it easy. For as low as $199, you can quickly create a state-specific, legally valid document that actually counts. 10 and 2, boss. Start your will at trustandwill.com and make it count.
I started experiencing hair loss on the edges specifically.
My part was extra thin, and then that's when I found hers.
Through hers, you can regrow thicker, fuller hair with a range of doctor-trusted treatments, including serums, chews, and pills, formulated with prescription ingredients and high-grade supplements.
I've started to feel more confident.
I tell all of my friends about hers.
Regrow hair in as few as 3 to 6 months. Get started today at forhers.com.
The ladies of Dubai.
Everybody's really hot. I'm the hottest.
Live by one rule.
Keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Helene is a hot mess.
That's dirty what you're doing.
I gave my shoulder to cry on. Before you put a knife on my back.
A snake will always change their skin, but they'll always be a snake.
I feel the same about you, darling.
The Real Housewives of Dubai. All new episodes Wednesdays on Peacock.
Ninjas in session. Time to get to work.
We're gonna have so much fun.
She did it!
I have a fire in my belly. Hitting the buzzer, that would be like winning gold.
What a battle! Got it!
I didn't know anything could feel this good.
American Ninja Warrior, Monday on NBC and Peacock.
You gotta see this. I'm Gotti Schwartz. We are following some breaking news. Severe storms continue to wreak havoc. The Supreme Court put a pause on a controversial immigration law. Protesters have redoubled their numbers right here at this makeshift barricade. The future of TikTok as we know it is at risk. Is this a ban or not? The craziest ride I have ever hitched. That is totality. Do you see yourselves in space?
I can go to space.
I feel great! Stay tuned now, weeknights at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific on NBC News Now.
More Americans turn to NBC News than any other news organization.
The Olympic Games are coming. But first, the best American athletes have to make Team USA. The U.S. Olympic Team Trials on NBC and Peacock.
Tonight, the state of emergency here in Baltimore. Should people be concerned about the safety of flying today? Closer to the Gaza
I know a lot of voters are exhausted. You know who else is exhausted? Every single player at halftime of the Super Bowl. Every one of them is exhausted. And what do? They go out there and they do it again. This is halftime in the Biden versus Trump contest for the future. And there's a second half coming up. And yeah, you have to play in both halves.
What if? What if? What if dreams came true? What if America's greatest basketball players were all stacked on one team? This summer, the dream comes true at the Paris Olympics.
Are you comfortable with the role the Supreme Court is playing in the 2024 election?
Do you bear responsibility for what is happening at the border?
Is it clear who's going to govern Gaza once this war is over? If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.
Numbers. They never lie. They tell it like it is. They don't lean politically to the left or to the right. In the end, numbers tell stories that words alone can't. And when you look at the world through numbers, somehow it all adds up.
Today, the Supreme Court upheld a federal law prohibiting domestic abusers from owning firearms. This is the second ruling in as many weeks that has many on the left breathing the very smallest sigh of relief. Last week, this conservative court unanimously ruled against reducing access to the abortion medication mifepristone. But reproductive freedom still far from safe this term. Soon this court will decide whether states can keep pregnant women from receiving emergency abortion care. And outside the court, there are plans to further erode reproductive rights. A coalition of conservative groups called Project 2025 has big plans for the Trump administration and the Comstock Act, the 1873 zombie law that prohibits the mailing of substances used for abortion and birth control. In a new piece for the New York Times, opinion columnist Michelle Goldberg offers this warning. Trump's allies say they'll enforce the Comstock Act. Believe them. To put a finer point on it, she quotes Jonathan F. Mitchell, the architect of a Texas abortion ban, who said, "We don't need a federal abortion ban when we have Comstock on the books." Joining me now, Michelle Goldberg, opinion columnist for the New York Times and author of this new piece. Michelle, you argue that Comstock should be a household name, which made me laugh because I feel like such a policy wonk every time
You're like,
that I use
isn't
it.
it?
Comstock, of course. But how do you explain it to someone who's not following this day to day?
Well, I would say a couple of things. I mean, first of all, maybe the one silver lining of the Arizona kind of briefly bringing back this Victorian era abortion ban is that people at least now know that that's a possibility, even though it was shocking. And it's a similar sort of thing, right? Comstock is this law from 1873, a law by this notoriously prudish vice crusader who kind of took pride on hounding people to their deaths in some cases and imprisoning people, burning books, going after, some of the great works of literature. But I think it was never repealed. People had just assumed that it was kind of a dead letter. It was made moot by a series of Supreme Court decisions on free speech, on birth control, and then most recently on abortion. But when Roe versus Wade was overturned, you started hearing from anti-abortion activists, this is still on the books. The mifepristone ruling that you mentioned, I mean, that originally part of the federal judge who originally tried to say that the FDA had to rescind its approval of mifepristone cited the fact that the Comstock Act was still on the books. The Supreme Court made that ruling on standing grounds, so they could still hear another case like this if they decide that the people have standing to bring the suit. And during arguments, you had both Alito and Thomas refer to the Comstock Act, refer to the fact that this thing is still in the books. Often they'll refer to it by its number in the criminal code. People don't like to, they know kind of that Comstock has these ramifications. And similarly, in the 2025 project's huge blueprint for what they would want to do in a second Trump administration, one of the things they say is that we can enforce the Comstock Act.
It strikes me that here you are sort of like waving your hands feverishly, being like, please, everyone, pay attention to what is happening with the Comstock Act. At the same time, you're reminding us that there are a lot of folks who are missing the bigger contours of what has happened here. You write about the New York Times poll released last month. 70% of people polled blame Joe Biden for the repeal of Roe since the ruling happened during his pregnancy. I mean, presidency. What do you make of that?
I mean, what I make of it is that there's still like a huge amount of education that needs to be done just about the kind of basic workings of American government and specifically about Donald Trump's role in the fact that we're now in this situation to begin with. People have a very hard time connecting this obvious libertine, this person who's clearly no kind of paragon of sexual continence. They have a hard time connecting him with this very punishing regime that they hate. And so even though he's clearly the one who did it, he's taking credit for it, there's a direct connection, it's just an argument that Democrats need to make again and again and again, which is why I think that they need to talk about the Comstock Act and make it clear to people that this is something that could very well come their way, even if they live in a state that protects abortion rights in a second Trump term.
Which is some of what you're seeing from Democrats in the Senate.
Yes. Tina Smith, Senator Tina Smith, who is somebody who used to work at Planned Parenthood before she was in politics, has a new bill, the Stop Comstock Act. I think that's the most important initiative that Democrats need to rally around, even if Republicans aren't actually going to let this get to Joe Biden's desk. And then there's also a petition by the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression to have Joe Biden pardon one of the Comstock Act's great victims posthumously. I mean, obviously, someone who's long dead. The idea being that this is a way to kind of raise the salience and say these Victorian era laws were a mistake and should certainly not be used against people today.
As you well know, this often sort of becomes a conversation about blue states and about red states. And I, did some reporting from an abortion clinic in Brooklyn and looked at sort of how they were preparing for the possibility of mifepristone no longer being available, stockpiling it. Even just the fact that clinics in blue states are now seeing so many more patients from states where abortion has become fully illegal that has an impact on your care. If you are someone who lives in a blue state, and yet when we talk about something like the Comstock, I think part of the question of breakthrough is how you say, like, this is coming for you, New York. This is coming for you, New Jersey. Like, this is not something that is happening somewhere else.
Right. And I think, this has been a problem. It was very hard, similarly with Roe versus Wade. Hillary Clinton in 2016 would try to get people to awaken to the danger that Roe versus Wade could be overturned. And people just didn't believe it. And Americans, it's funny because Americans love, apocalyptic movies and stuff. But in some ways, they kind of lack a catastrophic imagination.
And yet here we are, living it. Michelle Goldberg, as always.
Thank you
so much. And we have a lot more to get to tonight. The Manhattan District Attorney's request to extend Donald Trump's gag order in the hush money case, at least until sentencing. Why is the DA asking for this, and what it could mean for the presidential debate next week? I'm going to talk to Christy Greenberg, former federal prosecutor, about that next.
Strength is inside of you.
New Premiere by Kerastase Dual Action Repair Hair Care. With citric acid and glycerin, frees hair from calcium buildup, reconnects broken links between keratin chains, restoring up to 99% of hair's original strength. New Premiere by Kerastase.
I grew up doing rodeo and gymnastics. I'm probably the only country boy that's made it to the Olympics for gymnastics. My ambition as an athlete is to be the best that I can be. When you're competitive, that breeds greatness. Gymnastics is judged based off of how perfect you are, with perfect pointed toes, straight knees, straight elbows. That, I think, is a good motivator and goal to try to achieve perfection when it's so hard.
The Olympics from Paris starts July 26th on NBC and Peacock.
Have you heard? Soda's not a dirty word anymore. Introducing Poppy, the best thing to happen to lemon lime since, well, lemons and limes. It's the iconic, refreshing flavor you crave, but with 3 grams of sugar. Real lemon, real lime, real juicy flavor. The future of soda is now, and it's called Poppy. Poppy, soda's back.
You have an excellent warranty.
Warranty?
No, warranty.
Okay, gotta go.
You must have American Home Shield.
How'd you know?
I can tell your appliances and home systems are protected. Covered repairs and replacements are taken care of. Warranty never lies. Half off cookie dough! American Home Shield. Sign up today at ahs.com.
Introducing Anabam, the only custom designer sofa starting at $639. Shop Anabam and join thousands of customers who are obsessing over our sofa and learn what sets us apart. Try it for yourself with our satisfaction guarantee, 30 days to fall in love, or all your money back. What are you waiting for?
The greater the risk,
punch pull there. That is committed. This is mind-blowing.
the sweeter the reward. This is IndyCar.
Whoa.
How do you sort of mine for insights that work across the world?
I'll give you an example from our chocolate brand, Dove Galaxy. Its purpose is to empower women all throughout its supply chain. We are aiming to impact 1 million people. And the campaign idea that the team came up with is, your pleasure has promise. And they tested it in China, in the UK, in the Middle East, works everywhere. Because human-to-human impact, that insight of helping your fellow person, no matter where you are in the world, it just resonates. Yeah. And if it is true and connected to the brand, which in our case it is to Dove Galaxy, it's just very natural, and the consumers can see that.
My ambition is just to be the best that we can possibly be. If you're watching CNBC, it's because you want to get an edge, you want to get ahead. It's our job to deliver that. People always ask me what I want to do next, and I always think they're a little crazy. This is what I want to do. It's the best job you could possibly have.
Your vote will live after you. It will live in the Supreme Court. Your vote will decide what century we live in. Will we live in an age of legal and constitutional enlightenment, or will we live in 1864? Your vote is not just about the next 4 years. Your vote is nothing less than an exercise in incredible intergenerational power that will live long after you.
It is a summer of consequences for Donald Trump. In 3 weeks, he'll face sentencing in his New York hush money case. And today, the Manhattan DA's office urged the judge in that case to keep portions of Trump's gag order in place. In a new filing, the prosecutors cite threats against DA Alvin Bragg, threats that Trump has exacerbated with his inflammatory rhetoric about seeking retribution for his conviction. Prosecutors note that of the 289 threats logged by police in 2024, 61 involved threats to DA Bragg, his family, or his employees. For context, in 2022, prior to Trump's indictment, there was only one. The timing of this gag order request is especially crucial. In 1 week, Donald Trump will have to answer questions about his conviction when he squares off with Joe Biden in the first presidential debate. Joining me now, Christy Greenberg, former federal prosecutor who served for over a decade in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. Christy, thank you so much for being here. So the parameters, as I understand it, he would be allowed to talk about witnesses, but still under protection would be DA, juror, judge. I first want to sort of understand that distinction as you see it, and then what you think the judge will rule.
Yes, so he's always been able to talk about the DA and about the judge, and that's not changed. The DA is saying, yeah, you can talk about witnesses now that there's not a trial. So Stormy Daniels, Michael Cohen have been talking a lot to the media. He can respond to them now. But still a threat to the jurors because there's reporting which was actually cited by DA Bragg by NBC's own Ryan Riley that people are trying to identify these jurors, and they're threatening violence against them. And so that threat doesn't go away just because the trial is over. Similarly, there are threats against the DA's staff, the court staff, their families. And the DA really went into some detail about just how many threats were happening during the trial itself that would justify continuing this gag order at a minimum through the sentencing. I mean, of those 61 threats that you just cited, 56 of those happened during during the trial. Trials are really hard for prosecutors. They're really stressful. I can't even imagine the stress that this team had trying the, first criminal trial of a former president, and to do it with such vile and serious threats. And those 56 threats were the ones that NYPD investigated and said, these are actionable. We need to take further steps. There were 500 other threatening emails and calls that didn't even rise to that level. It is just an onslaught of harassment that these prosecutors are dealing with during such a high pressure cooker trial. It's really extraordinary, just the public service that they provided to us under those circumstances.
I also thought it was interesting that the DA's office used the filing to respond to Trump's accusation that DA Bragg is somehow working with President Biden so that Trump doesn't have his full free speech at the debate, writing, quote, defendant offers no factual basis for this assertion, and there is none. The claim is a lie. I mean, kind of evergreen when it comes to some of these Trump conspiracy theories, but your reaction to the fact that they felt they needed to address it here?
I'm glad they did, because when something is so plainly a lie, you have to call it that. Call it what it is. Don't use, flowery language. It is a lie. It is one of many lies that Donald Trump has been telling. And Alvin Bragg is very careful, right? He's somebody who does not give press conferences. He's not outside the courtroom talking to the press. He speaks through his briefing, through the court filings, as he should. And so this was really his opportunity to be able to address this particular attack, which has changed so much of the course of public, the public speaking on this. People really think that this is a political prosecution. And being in the trial every day, I can tell you it wasn't. And so this was his opportunity to respond to that.
Help me understand what happens if Trump violates his gag order on Thursday at the presidential debate.
Well, if he violates his gag order, I don't think the prosecutors then are going to say, let's have a hearing about a violation of gag order.
But does
like
it
what we've already
change the
seen.
judge's thinking at all?
It should, and I think it will factor into his sentencing, because the DA is going to say, look, he is continuing to not show any respect for the law. There's blatant disregard for the law here. And that happened during the trial, and it's continuing even after a guilty verdict. And that's very powerful, I think, for the judge to be able to say, is this somebody, if I sentenced him to probation, that can actually follow the rules of probation? He didn't follow my court orders. How is he going to follow the rules of probation if he continues to violate even after the guilty verdict?
I have 1 minute left, which means I'm going to ask you a question that you absolutely cannot answer in a minute, which is that a judge in Nevada today dismissed the state's fake electors case over a lack of jurisdiction. Just real quickly, what does that mean?
So it was dismissed because of a venue issue. Basically, what the judge said is these are charges that deal with forging those fake elector certificates. And that didn't happen in the county where the prosecutors brought the case. And you have to charge the case where the crimes were actually committed. So it's a technicality. The good news is, even if that's accurate, that shouldn't affect any of the other states' fake elector cases. This is a very specific to this case ruling.
I appreciate that after the Trump years, myself, our audience, all know about venue. It's like we went to like a crash course in law school. Christy Greenberg, as always, thank you so much for being with us. Coming up, the last time Donald Trump came to Philadelphia, it was to unveil his signature gold sneakers. Now he's heading back to the Democratic stronghold to try to win over voters. More on that next.
You never know what you're capable of until you try.
I've been to 4 Olympics.
These races inspire me to push harder and grow.
Oh, what a finish!
I want to be the first mom to beat stage 1.
8 seasons in the making!
I have a fire in my belly. Hitting the buzzer. That would be like winning gold.
American Ninja Warrior, July 1st on NBC and Peacock.
Is that grease on your pants, or are you just happy to see me?
This has changed our relationship completely.
You need to figure it out or you're both gone.
Don't drop the anchor.
Disaster.
I love you so much.
We do.
The paper towel will absorb the acid.
That's crazy.
Green tea to calm acne. This is my favorite tip of the day.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Oh, that's genius. You just saved me $40.
Each week on my podcast, I'm joined by uniquely qualified guests who help me take a big picture look at the issues. This week, Representative Jasmine Crockett on criminal justice and congressional politics. Why is this happening? Listen now wherever you get your podcasts.
Other than launching his gold sneaker line at SneakerCon in February, for years now, Donald Trump has largely avoided the city of Philadelphia. It is such a Democratic stronghold. Trump has literally never even held a rally there. That is, until tomorrow. Tomorrow, Trump heads to Philadelphia for his first ever rally in the city, a rally that comes just weeks after the Trump campaign opened their first ever Philadelphia campaign office. So what is Trump's angle here? Joining me now, Malcolm Kenyatta, a state representative in Pennsylvania and a member of the Biden-Harris campaign's National Advisory Board. Sir, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Why Philly? Why now?
You know what? I think a part of what we have to address always, the stakes.
Please.
This year is going to determine what the next few decades look like.
Amen.
And I think there's been this false BS narrative that Trump is courting black voters. Look at what happened in Detroit. They didn't even attempt to fill the room with black folks. And then he left that church to go hang out with Charlie Kirk, who said Martin Luther King was a bad guy and that the Civil Rights Act, who knows if that was a bad idea. He sends in a Cowboys jersey does not mean you're trying to reach out to Eagles fans. You can come to a place where black people are. But bringing his same nonsense, racist, bigoted rhetoric Black folks hear him very clearly, and I'm telling you, I don't care what people have been saying on TV. Black voters ended his presidency in North Philly, and we're going to make sure he never gets back to the White House.
I appreciate about you that you broke through the noise to give me signal, because this is not about the odds of this race. This is, as you said, about the stakes of this race. So when you were having conversations with voters in Pennsylvania or elsewhere about the stakes of this race, what is it then that you tell them about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris that you find most resonates for them?
Listen, every election, folks are running for office to wield a tool, because every elected position is just a tool. And so the question always is, what do these candidates want to build? Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have been clear about building an economy where working people, working families like mine, don't spend every day feeling shaky. They feel secure. They're stable because they know they have access to good health care, access to the benefits that they deserve on the job. They know that their kids are going to go to a good school, and that when those kids get out into the workforce, they're able to do things like buy their first home. Donald Trump's entire reason for running for president is trying to avoid criminal liability for all the crimes that he committed. A jury in this city here in New York said 34 times that he is guilty. Voters in North Philly said Donald Trump's famous line to him, "You're fired." We're going to say we're not rehiring somebody with this bad of an exit interview, and somebody who's been so dismissive and disrespectful to Black voters. And so, sure, show up to North Philly. We're going to give him the type of welcome that he deserves to.
Let me ask you about another candidate. RFK Jr. turned in enough petition signatures just yesterday to get on the Pennsylvania ballot. I mean, just does that in any way impact scramble the race? Do you want to let your face do the talking, Malcolm?
Listen, I have not spent a lot of time with this sideshow candidate who is funded by the same donors who are pushing Donald Trump. RFK Jr. is just an intern for the Trump campaign. His entire reason for being in the race is to try to siphon votes from President Biden. But he's not going to be successful because people are not stupid. Pennsylvania voters, and I think Americans in general, folks just want to know that their family's going to be okay. They want to know that when they look in their kids' eyes, they're not telling them a lie when they say life's going to be a little bit better for them than it was when they were growing up. And Joe Biden has laid out a plan and has achieved things that make it easier for working families to feel more stable, less insecure. Donald Trump is in this for himself, and he's going to have a rude awakening in November.
Malcolm Kenyatta from the great state of Pennsylvania. Thank you so much for being with us. Pennsylvania State House Representative, member of the Biden-Harris Campaign's National Advisory Board. And that is our show for tonight. You can catch me this weekend on my regular show, The Weekend, at 8 a.m. Eastern, Saturdays and Sundays. I need to go to bed right now. Our guest tomorrow, Maryland Governor and rising Democratic star Wes Moore. Now is the time for the last word with Ali Velshi in for Lawrence. Good morning, Ali, the other person who needs to be up bright and early tomorrow.
I got a lot of surprises tonight. I walk in, I see you on TV. I come in to say hello to you, and I run into Malcolm Kenyatta, who's a fellow Pennsylvanian, and it was great to see him. And you know, if the campaign has people like him talking about what people are actually feeling out there, I think that's going to be very, very helpful. You can give people statistics, you can give people all sorts of stuff, but we have to have real conversations about how are these things affecting you at home. So I thought a lot of surprises for me, a lot of fun in one hallway running into two of my old friends. I'm going to see you in not too many hours.
We're going to do this all over again. Have a great night.
Get some sleep, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we got a surprise from the Supreme Court today, a ruling in favor of common sense. All the justices except Clarence Thomas joined in favor of a common sense decision in the case of preventing domestic abusers from having guns. Chief Justice Roberts, in the majority opinion, wrote, quote, "The laws confirm what common sense suggests. When an individual poses a clear threat of physical violence to another, the threatening individual may be disarmed," end quote. When an individual poses a clear threat, that threatening individual may be disarmed. It's a good concept. Does it apply to this individual?
Those J6 warriors, they were warriors, but they were really more than anything else. They're victims of what happened. All they were doing is protesting a rigged election.
The Supreme Court again today said nothing about that individual. He's not trying to buy a gun. He's trying to get complete immunity for the effort to overthrow the election that culminated in the violent attack on the Capitol on January the 6th. He's calling the convicted attackers his warriors, victims. Those are the people who beat police officers, hunted members of Congress, threatened to hang the vice president. He's repeating the lie that the election he lost was rigged. He has not been deterred in the least. He's doubling down. Trump is saying that he will pardon these criminals, offering them immunity and possibly the opportunity to do it again. And the court said nothing on that today. Even though it's been 6 months since Special Prosecutor Jack Smith asked for expedited consideration of this matter, 4 months since a federal appeals court panel unanimously